said, I really love the way Freeport handles their Route 1. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could have ours be like that? So we went out and we started to measure and do what we call synoptic surveys. The other night when I showed these, we only had done Freeport, and since then we actually have now done your town and gone through some of the most loved streets in Yarmouth and measured and documented and calculated average densities and street widths and sidewalk widths and all of the things that make up this place, the essence of this place. So as we're looking forward to the character-based zoning ordinance that will support the master plan, all of the numbers and the setbacks and things that would be included in that are based on some place that people told us they'd like to see more of as we went through. So we started to look diagrammatically at connections to and from where roads kind of already went through, and you start to see that the street network pattern in the historic downtown is much different than along the Route 1, and that was important for us to see. And then you have obviously the major traffic going down on 295. And we started thinking about, the fact that Route 1 is a really actually pretty long corridor, and so how do you break it up into manageable parts and pieces if we're thinking about doing the things that we've heard from the community and making walkable, bikeable, pedestrian-friendly streets of character and beauty. How do you do that? And so we started thinking, as you come off of 295 on either end, it's really sort of this moment where you're coming through more of a natural area, sort of the wilderness moment as you come in before you know you've actually arrived somewhere. We studied the idea that you have these nodes. You have the historic village area down near the water. I guess that was where things started. And then since then, that node has been sort of migrated up. You still have two distinct areas, but you have a second node. And so we're sort of imagining this as sort of the civic and downtown node. And then you have a transition area, and then two new node areas that we're talking about creating and making really interesting spaces. Now, one of the things that we heard from a lot of people about is the idea of connectivity. We talked about it as well, and kind of understanding and knowing that the more connections you have, the more opportunities you have to get to any place in town in a number of different ways, which in the end actually helps with traffic problems, makes more walkable blocks, pedestrian-friendly things, etc. And so here we're looking at sort of an extreme case of making road connections. Now, those of you who live on the streets where roads connect, we've heard that not everyone's excited about that, and we know that hasn't gone unsaid. However, we've actually heard some people who live on the street say, wow, that would be really cool if my street finally went through, because that's really convenient. Now I can drive or walk sort of in these areas. And when you start to look at it, these sort of additional connections are a bit circuitous, and realistically people will take the path of least resistance when they're driving, and most often won't be trying to infiltrate slow speed neighborhood streets to get where they're going. But this is something for you guys to decide in the end. Are these the right moves to make? It's not something that the zoning ordinance is dependent on. It's just part of a master planning process to understand how to fully transform the corridor into sort of the best case scenario. And in the end, what would typically happen is some of the connections happen and some of them don't. But you guys have been surprising us at every turn, being so open to new ideas, being so participatory in the process. It wouldn't surprise me if you guys were actually, one of the ones who were able to make all the connections one day. So before we get to the meat of the rest of the presentation, I want to go to Hillside, because I want to end on the Route 1 stuff, since that was the main focus of our study area. Now, we had meetings with the Hillside residents, and lots of conversations and discussion about that. What to do about Hillside. The big problem was Mr. Wheeler's speeding up and down, the kids trying to walk to and from school. What happens at the school where you enter into the parking lot, and the parking lot's now sort of a street and a cut through, and all of these things that have happened, and also the desire to maintain the really interesting, beautiful rural character of that road. So with our transportation engineer and planning team, we powwowed and sat down to figure out some things that we could do. So for those who've lost your bearings, so that I've jumped over to a different portion of town. So here's Main Street, and here is Hillside Street. Here's the school, here's the elementary school. And so what we've done is we showed a little preview of our big idea the other night. And the main idea is as you come down, look, we talked about adjusting the trajectory of the road so it wasn't just so dead straight as you can fly down as far as you can see. And so here we've actually found a moment where there's nothing going on either side, trying to stay pretty much within the existing right-of-way. Turned the road a little bit, made a small civic space, planted some trees in the middle, because I showed you guys some really interesting examples of trees planted right in the middle of roads, literally, that you have to go around, and you see them when you're driving down the road and you think, okay, there's a tree there, oh, I've got to go around it. So that's something like that's happening here, and you create this moment, this space, sort of widening the road. It's pretty neat, and you go one way on either side. As you come down here, we've actually shown Hillside turning in. And so this is McCartney coming up here, and it currently just curves. And there's a paper road or right-of-way that heads straight up to Hillside that's never been built. So we actually showed extending that through that paper road and then connecting so that Hillside turns. And to continue on the hillside, you then actually make a right-hand turn and carry on down the way. Now, when you get to the school, we had some people bring up the idea of doing sort of a jug handle drop-off. And so we took that idea and elaborated it, and we made a civic space so you've kind of come to some place that's important, and you need to pay more attention, slow down, and you can come in, and now we've sort of readjusted the traffic flow pattern so that instead of driving through the parking lot, you actually have a little lane that comes down. The parking lot's beside it. You can have drop-off along here for either buses or, it's not plugged in, that's why it's doing it. You might plug in. You can either have drop-off along here for buses or for cars, and down here for whichever one didn't go here. You can, at this point, after you drop off, carry on and come back out if you want, so you have in and out traffic. Or if you need to go on down, you come down a proper road. We've adjusted the drop-off or the little roundabout there in front of the school that has the stop signs in it, which is really confusing, and made this a larger space here, and you continue on your way. Or you can carry on and try and go back out. So there's all sorts of ways that the circulation has been much improved. Now, I will say, for those of you who are parents who go through this every day, there may be some things we miss. Our assignment wasn't really to work on the parking and the circulation in school, but we couldn't help ourselves, at least give it a shot. I wanted to give you guys some ideas. So if you're sitting there thinking, that'll never work, sure. Okay, we'll talk about that afterwards. But you see the big idea is really starting to just sort of break this into these moments, and we know that when you do something that's traffic calming, you need to do it probably every 250 or 350 feet or less if you can, and so we try to kind of keep that rhythm as you go down. So those are some of the big ideas for Hillside, for those of you who've been waiting to see about that. So here we go. We look at the entire corridor. We have done a lot of things here, and looking at some really interesting opportunities. I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to start to see. So as you come in into town, this is actually Portland Street here, and there's sort of this crazy intersection right now. We heard tons of people saying, it's a mess. We really need to do something different. And so we said, well, let's actually regularize that a little bit and bring it up and sort of feature the school here. There's a large civic space, so you can circulate around here if you need to, or come straight out here. Now there's a nice 90-degree four-way stop intersection, and we begin looking at the transformation. You can start to see some of the boulevard concepts that have come into play here. You start to see these little pink buildings. These are proposed buildings, and the black buildings are existing. And you can start to see some other road connections coming through. Again, we know that these aren't exciting to everyone, but we wanted to show them for you guys to consider as you start talking about what might happen at this area here. Moving on up a little bit, wanting to take the, there's an existing strip